Underlying love, beneath the surface it lies, in the whispers of secrets and unspoken ties, caught between the heart's gentle tug and the dance of romance, in the arms of love.
You are listening to Bradley Barkhurst's Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery. Chapter 4, Part 2. Thunder rumbles. Questions loom. After admiring the vista from the overlook, Elizabeth and her mother strolled arm in arm down into Alt Park proper. Nestled amongst ancient oaks and maples stood the park's picturesque pavilion. The intricate Victorian-era structure had a peaked roof with ornate barge boards trimmed in gingerbread details. Arched windows framed views out over the rolling lawns surrounding it. Inside, the polished wood-beamed ceiling soared overhead. Elizabeth and her mother sat for a while on a stone bench, enjoying the pavilion's cool shade. Elizabeth closed her eyes, soaking in the birdsong and rustling leaves. It was a perfectly peaceful spot to rest and reflect. When they exited, Elizabeth took one last long look at the graceful building. She imagined ladies and gentlemen of a bygone era gathering there in their finery. For over a century, the pavilion had welcomed generations seeking nature's beauty. She felt blessed to now be among them. With the pavilion watching over them, Elizabeth and her mother strolled the curving pathways, both longing to linger in this serene place. But the setting sun warned it was time to continue on. All too soon, Elizabeth and her mother were back in the taxi, winding their way down Mount Lookout. After collecting Elizabeth's suitcase from Uncle Herbert's, they continued towards the bustling Union Terminal as the gray clouds started to roll in. When the grand Art Deco terminal came into view, Elizabeth squeezed her mother's hand tightly.
Thank you for everything, Mother. This was just what I needed.
Of course, my dear. I'm so glad we had this time together.
Her mother said, dabbing her eyes. They held each other in a fierce, loving embrace.
Give Uncle Herbert my love, and let me know about arrangements for Aunt Gracie once they're settled,
Elizabeth said as she pulled away. Her mother nodded.
She'll be buried in Worthington, per her wishes. I'll telephone you with the details.
With final goodbyes, Elizabeth passed through the majestic terminal, the awe-inspiring murals lifting her spirits. She was grateful for the bittersweet day honoring Gracie's memory. Holding her loved ones in her heart, she boarded the train back home. Night had fallen as Elizabeth boarded the train bound for home. She settled into her seat as the train lurched into motion. The rhythmic clacking of the wheels over the tracks soon lulled her into a contemplative state. Muffled conversations mingled with the shuffle of feet and muted thunder of suitcases rolling down the aisle. Rain pattered softly on the windows as autumn fields glided by in darkness. Lightning flickered, briefly illuminating the shadowy Ohio farmland. As thunder rumbled overhead, Elizabeth felt suddenly cold and alone. She yearned for Samuel's strong arms embracing her, his deep voice gently soothing away her sadness. In her mind, she replayed their chance encounter at the pub. The intensity of his gaze across the crowded room had awoken long-buried feelings. The memory of his face still thrilled her heart and quickened her pulse. More than anything, Elizabeth longed to see Samuel again, speak with him, feel his touch. The train sped north through the stormy night as she sat restless, questioning choices that now felt uncertain. Samuel occupied her thoughts as heavily as the rain lashed the windows. Her longing fused with each crack of thunder, echoing her own conflicted heart. As the train gathered speed, Elizabeth felt her heart racing to match its rapid tempo. The engine's shrill whistle pierced the night as they barreled ahead. Billowing steam briefly obscured her view before dissipating into the darkness. Elizabeth pressed her forehead to the glass, watching her reflection blur with the raindrops streaking down. Her mind blurred too, torn between the past and present. Seeing Samuel had been like a lightning bolt, reanimating dormant feelings. Now her heart galloped as fast as the churning pistons propelling the train forward. The sway and rumble of the rail car made it impossible to truly rest. Elizabeth shifted in her seat, uneasy with indecision. She sensed she was hurtling towards some unknown reckoning. Outside, wind-lashed trees whizzed past in ominous shadows. The storm mirrored her inner turbulence. Elizabeth prayed she would find clarity before reaching her destination. On and on the train plunged through the black, rainy night, mile after mile, bringing her closer to a crossroads she could no longer avoid. The train began slowing as it approached the outskirts of northern Columbus.
Next stop, Worthington Station.
The conductor called out. Elizabeth's pulse quickened, knowing she was close to home. During the ride, her path had become clear. As soon as she dropped her bags, she would head straight for the New England Inn. She had to see Samuel to demand answers to the questions that plagued her. Why he never wrote, where he had been, what brought him back now. The time for confusion was over. The train ground to a halt at the tiny Worthington station. Rain poured down as Elizabeth stepped onto the platform, the harsh wind whipping her coat. She tightened the belt on her trench coat and unfurled the umbrella her mother gave her before retrieving her suitcase. Across the tracks, she noticed a small fire flickering under the eaves of the station. There was old hobo Jeff, hunkered down, wearing a very wet brown jacket, cooking a can of beans while taking swigs from a bottle of whiskey. Elizabeth paused, watching Jeff shiver in the downpour.
I bet he's cold on a night like this,
she murmured to herself. But she had no time to delay. With a purposeful stride, Elizabeth hailed a cab from the station and told the driver to drive directly towards the New England Inn with haste. As they drove on Granville Road to turn south onto High Street, she noticed the rain beginning to let up. Arriving in front of the inn, Elizabeth entered holding her suitcase with her heart pounding. She rushed inside and scanned the bar. But Samuel was nowhere to be found. Crestfallen and still wet, she hurried to the front desk.
Excuse me, is there a Samuel Lewis staying here?
She asked the attendant breathlessly.
I'm afraid not, miss.
He replied with an apologetic smile.
A Mr. Lewis checked out last evening.
Elizabeth hurried back outside, dismayed. By chance, her cab was still idling by the curb. As she slid despondently into the back seat, the driver gave her a sympathetic look in the rearview mirror.
No luck finding who you were looking for, miss?
He asked kindly.
No, I was too late.
Elizabeth sighed. The cabbie clucked his tongue and drove her home. The rain was only sprinkling, but drops of water rolled down the street like tears on a face. When they arrived, Elizabeth paid the cabbie and trudged up the puddled driveway, defeated. But peeking from her mailbox was a letter, bearing Samuel's unmistakable handwriting. Heart racing anew, she grabbed the envelope and rushed inside, shutting out the stormy darkness. With trembling hands, she tore open the seal by the entryway light. Without even shutting the front door, a thrill of anticipation ran through her as she rapidly scanned the letter's contents, hungry for answers at last. Elizabeth turned on the hallway light and eagerly began reading Samuel's letter.
Dearest Elizabeth, I'm writing in hopes this letter finds you well. I know it's been many years since we last spoke, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. After high school, trying to work the family farm in Kansas during those long, hard years of dust storms took everything I had. I felt it would be too painful to write you when I did not know if or when I might return. I couldn't continue to break your heart or mine. But now I am back in Worthington. My uncle is training me at his insurance business here. Upon arriving, you were my first thought. That chance glimpse of you at the inn seemed like providence. I regret leaving things unresolved between us for so long. Please know that you have never left my heart. Your guy, Samuel.
Tears filled Elizabeth's eyes as she read his heartfelt words. But just then, a chilling scream pierced the night air outside. She dropped the letter and ran to the window. Peering out into the darkness, she struggled to make out the source of the cries. Squinting into the night, Elizabeth could just make out a male figure wearing a dark trench coat, holding what appeared to be an object in his hand. He was sprinting past her house up the street. A minute later, neighbors began emerging from their homes to investigate the commotion.
"What on earth is happening?"
came a voice next door. Elizabeth turned to see Betty Wimsfeld stepping outside. Robe pulled tight against the chill.
I'm not sure. I heard a scream and saw someone running.
Elizabeth replied. The two women hurried down to the sidewalk, straining to make out details in the darkness. Soon, police car sirens pierced the air. The cars pulled to a stop several houses down, its flashing lights illuminating the street.
"That's the Collins place,"
Betty exclaimed.
Little Amy's house.
Elizabeth felt her stomach drop.
Something's wrong. We should go help,
she said. Casting one last glance back at Samuel's letter sitting on the table, she rushed with Betty towards the familiar home, praying young Amy was unharmed. Betty and Elizabeth hurried down the sidewalk toward the Collins home as a sound of thunder rumbled from the passing storm. The Collins house windows were ablaze with flashing police lights. As they got closer, a young officer approached and told the ladies not to approach any further. Through the open front door, they could see little Amy sitting on her mother's lap, both crying. Soon, the Corbin Funeral Home's Packard-Henny ambulance arrived on the scene. Somber-faced men wheeled out a gurney holding a shrouded figure, Mr. Collins. Elizabeth could hear one of the police officers telling the ambulance driver,
He was stabbed to death when we got here.
Neighbors lined the street in their robes and slippers, faces pale with shock.
"How awful, poor Mr. Collins. He was such a good banker,"
murmured a shaken Mrs. Reap.
"What on earth happened?"
said Mr. Hunter from across the street. His wife dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief.
"It's Mr. Collins from the Worthington Savings Bank,"
replied Mrs. Reap. The damp puddles on the night street seemed to catch the tears of the neighborhood. Elizabeth gripped Betty's hand tightly, relief washing over her that Amy was unharmed. But the tragedy of Mr. Collins's death still hung heavy in the air as fog started to roll in, leaving the neighborhood reeling. Betty said,
That sweet little Amy Collins without her father. It's too awful.
Thank you for listening to Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery. First Aunt Gracie passing away and now Mr. Collins? Oh dear, who is that mysterious shadowing person running past Elizabeth's house, and where is Samuel now? Find all this and more in the continuing episodes. Next up, part 1 of chapter 5, Fog of Confusion.